This is a book review of Damien Echols' book, High Magick. A guide to spiritual practices that saved my life on death row. If you don't know Damien Echols, you need to. He is an inspiration. So, High Magick, like I said, Damien Echols' story is amazing of his life on 18 years he spent on death row. Eddie Vedder, lots of other celebrities, not that that matters, but Eddie Vedder was a huge support as well as Johnny Depp to him. So before I do the contents, I'd like to read. The foreword is written by Eddie Vedder, but I'd like to read his preface. And I think that this is really all you need to know to make you want to run right out and get this book. My story. For those of you who don't know me or who have never heard my story, I want to start with a little background information about me and my journey. Although this is a book of practices meant to help you in whatever ways you see fit, it's also a travelogue of sorts, which means it's full of details and detours that feel important to offer you on your own journey with magic. If you want a more thorough personal story, please read Life After Death and Yours for Eternity. It's all in there. Anyway, for now, here's a summary to help you get to know me a little better before we dive into learning and practicing magic. I grew up extremely poor. On a regular basis, my family couldn't afford food, new clothes, electricity, running water, heat, you name it. In the winter, we froze, and in the summer, we burned. I was rarely clean and often hungry. On the one hand, you could say that my upbringing prepared me for the rituals to come, but it's no way for a kid to grow up, as too many children around the world well know. My parents, just kids themselves, didn't seem to have any goals other than to make it through another day. They didn't push me to better myself or to do well in school, and I eventually dropped out just as they had. Even before that, I knew there had to be more to life, something higher and more meaningful, but I wasn't sure what it was. The only thing to read around our house were those cheap tabloids you see in line at the grocery store. The one with headlines like, "Half goat, half boy haunts the banks of the Mississippi." I felt dirty and degraded just looking at them. If you've ever picked one up, you know they all have these crazy ads at the back, and it was there that I came across an ad for a book on magic. Not just any book, but one that promised all the secrets of magic that had ever been recorded. I can't describe the impact that had on me as a kid. To find out that magic wasn't just something from a bygone age, that it wasn't an arcane art lost in the sands of time, filled me with an unusual sense of hope and excitement. Magic was out there in the world, and I could learn and practice it. That realization was like a bomb going off inside me. From that moment on, I pursued magic as if my life depended on it, and in fact, later it did. I never got that book, no matter how much I begged. When you're struggling to survive, you don't have money to waste on things like books. Fortunately, libraries are free, and part of my way coping with the degrading conditions of my childhood was to go to libraries and escape into the world of books. Horror novels had been my favorite genre. I loved anything written by Stephen King. So, in the library, I began my study of magic and learned about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an organization devoted to the study of metaphysics and all sorts of occult topics. More about them later. Flash forward a bit. Some would call me a troubled teen, the usual stuff. High school dropout, long hair, repeated run-ins with the law. I had only one friend, Jason, and he was an outcast like me. See, we lived in a small, right-wing fundamentalist town where kids who wore Metallica shirts and practiced ceremonial magic were shunned, damned, and accused of everything under the sun. So in a way, it wasn't a surprise when the cops showed up at the mobile home where I lived, handcuffed Jason and me, and took us to the station to be interrogated. They threw me in this cell about the size of a phone booth. I couldn't sit or lie down. I had to stand up all night long. Occasionally, a cop would come by to ask if I was ready to make my confession. I had no idea what he was talking about. But I quickly learned. In the morning, a judge charged me with killing 3 8-year-old boys as part of some satanic sacrifice. Someone else, not Jason, had admitted to being part of the ceremony and claimed I was the ringleader. I read the transcript of the so-called confession. It was a bizarre, patchwork horror movie story that didn't make sense at all. It didn't make sense because the police had cruelly coerced it out of a mentally challenged kid, Jesse, from my neighborhood. They psychologically tortured him, made him go without food, water, or sleep for over 12 hours, and encouraged him to implicate Jason and me, which was all they needed to hear. Never mind the fact that Jesse's description of the crime scene was totally off. When I went to trial, the evidence presented against me focused on the music I listened to, my interest in Magick, and my love of Stephen King novels. Of course, the jury took this as proof that I brutally murdered 3 young boys. They found me guilty of 3 counts of capital murder and sentenced me to die by lethal injection. I spent the next 18 years and 76 days on death row, over half of that time in solitary confinement. For now, I'll spare you the finer points of that time: the raw sewage, the blistering heat, the rats and mosquitoes, the isolation, and the daily beatings by the guards. The most important point here is that I survived. Not only did I survive, I got out. How? The long story is complicated and well documented elsewhere. In brief, I owe my life to DNA evidence, the HBO Paradise Lost documentaries, and so many people from around the world who protested on my behalf. But the short version, and the point of this book, is simple. Magick saved my life. Magick was the only thing in prison that gave my life purpose and kept me sane. Magick was the only thing I had to protect myself with. And that's what this book is about, the practices that kept me alive for nearly 2 decades on death row. So as you can see, Damien Echols is an amazing guy with an incredible survival story, and he owes it all to Magick. So that, of course, made me want to read more. This is the first book I read. And I'm just going to go through the table of contents quickly. I just read my story. Next is why learn magic, what magic is and what magic isn't. Part 2, why spell books don't work. As above, so below, the power of attention, training your mind, the magic of visualization, raising and directing energy. Working with doubt, personalizing your practice and getting started. Part 3, practicing variations of the 4-fold breath, solar application, lunar application, seasonal application. Some history of Magick, the middle pillar, the Kabbalistic cross, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Part 4, additional practices, the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, bare bones invocation, creating thought forms, talismans, amulets, and tattoos, water, divination, meal blessings, final thoughts, magical implements, urban shamanism, know thyself. One thing I wanted to point out, that here's a really important part as you begin. Chapter 4, as above, so below, the power of intention. And this is very much like creative visualization, manifesting, the law of attraction, and prayer. But as I've said before, Magick has an added quality to it because you can also invoke angels, planetary energies, the sun, the moon, and the rituals help keep you grounded in your vision of what you want. So he talks about the power of attention, and that's why I think that Magick and the law of attraction really do go hand in hand. So he talks in here about how in Magick, there's one level of reality that we pay really close attention to, and it goes by many names. The Chinese call it Qi or Ki. The Japanese say Ki. The ancient Jewish Kabbalah, it's called Ruach, and the Hindu refers to it as prana. In the fictional Star Wars universe, we know it as the Force. I just call it energy because the word comes with less baggage and cultural nuance for me. Plus, there's no particular religious significance to the word. Even scientists talk about energy. This book helped my husband when he was getting sober. That's why there's notes here about drowning energy in alcohol. We are constantly interacting with other forms of energy, the energy of other people, places, and things. And you absorb this energy. And when you hang out with people who have a certain energy, you're going to absorb that energy. So it's important to look around you and see What energy are you absorbing? If you are new to Magick and the law of attraction, if you're just starting out with all of this, what you pay attention to expands. What you focus your attention on expands. You get more of it. So if you really don't want to be sick and you keep picturing yourself being sick in bed because you don't want it, what you're focusing on expands. Pretty soon you're going to find yourself laying in bed sick. I like this part too when he talks about energy and magic, that the deep parts of our psyche don't understand words. They understand images and emotions. So if you keep focusing on a particular image, it will have no choice but to manifest if you constantly focus on the image and the feeling behind it. And that's why it's so important to keep your rituals positive and focus on what you do want, not what you don't want. And so he helps you direct your attention, reframing negative thoughts into positive, visualizing. Another part I really like, as you get into the book in the beginning, is he talks about training your mind, and how when he got out of prison from being on death row, he was living in New York City with his wife. That's a wonderful love story. He says, even though he was free, it was one of the lowest points in his life, just dealing with all that PTSD. And he decided to buy a bicycle and ride it in New York City. So he said he was absolutely floored with it. But as he tells the story, his point is, what he realized is that it was a meditative thing for him because it took so much focus and attention that he found himself in a meditative state. And I liked that because meditation doesn't have to be passive. And he says here, in the West, we have this idea that meditation is passive. So I really liked that idea that meditation can be, when you're working in your garden, when you're driving in your car, when you're working out. It doesn't have to be just sitting on the floor doing deep breaths. And he goes into detail again about how meditation requires you to pay attention to what you're focusing on. But meditation is what helps you become aware of what you're focusing on. And you want to pay attention to the present moment and what you're visualizing. And you can actually train your mind to do that. You have to train your mind to do it. It has to become a habit and routine, because it's so easy to just accidentally get right back into thoughts that cause emotions, that cause negative energy. Meditation, active meditation, forces you to live in the present moment. It enables you to pay attention to the present moment and to train your mind to do what you want it to do. We control our mind. When we get lost, it's because we are letting our mind control us. Our thoughts are controlling us, but we can train our mind to do what we want it to do. And meditation is the way through that. And again, meditation can be active. So that's why meditation is important. If you're not aware of precisely where your attention is, it's hard to change your focus onto what you want it to do. So you can steer your attention through meditation. And I just really like that. And then I have often thought, what is the opposite of fear? One day my kids and I were talking about opposites and meaning antonyms. And we couldn't figure out what's the opposite of fear. What actually is it? Is it love? No, that's the opposite of hate. Is it peace? That's the opposite of war. Truth, but he says most people think the opposite of faith is disbelief. It's not. The opposite of faith is fear. And I couldn't believe when I read that, because I had this conversation with my kids years ago about what is the antonym of the word fear. Faith. That makes sense. I do like that. Faith means directing our focus toward that which we want to manifest. We feed what we fear, just as we feed what we hope for and desire. Meditation helps us see exactly where we're putting our energy and enables us to change the blueprint of our attention on the astral and mental planes. When we do that, we make it far more possible to manifest what we want on the material plane. Similar to Jerry and Esther Hicks' books, once you have a desire and you put your mind into it, you think it, It already exists in the astral realm. Then it's just a matter of manifesting it here on the material plane. So then he goes to 5 basic meditations, more practices on the magic of visualization. This is all before he even gets into any of the rituals. So the first parts of this book is about energy, law of attraction, visualization. That's why it just warms you up to wanting to get to know, how does magic apply to this? How is it more powerful than the law of attraction? How is it more powerful than prayer? From my experience, magic is more powerful than prayer and the law of attraction. I recommend it for if you want to introduce somebody you care about to magic. This is such a great introduction because Damien is so raw, honest, and genuine, and you want to try what worked for him. It's just an amazing book. There's Damien Echols right there. You can find him on YouTube as well. And thank you for watching.